All right, everybody, we are back. This is the Hood Rat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR. Or perhaps you're watching this on Facebook. How much longer? Who knows? But so we're actually, right now, we're joined by a very special guest. This is Genevieve Leigh from the International Youth and Students for Social Equality out of the University of Michigan. Really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and join us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I invited you on because recently y'all experienced something we've been talking about on our program just pretty consistently for a while now. But it looks like your local page ended up getting zucked, as the kids say. I want to just we'll just start off. I wanted to ask you just a refresher. Just briefly tell folks, you know, who the IYSSE is, and then kind of just tell us a story of, you know, getting knocked off of Facebook, getting back on, kind of how you know, the rest of the party and the WSWS caught wind of it. But yeah, please go on ahead and introduce yourself and tell your story.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to start by saying that IYSSE is the youth and student section of a political party called the Socialist Equality Party. And we're socialists, we're Marxists. We publish the World Socialist website, which has also been the subject of censorship, which I maybe can speak on a little bit later. The immediate censorship that we're talking about today, or I should say the latest, was on Facebook. Our University of Michigan IYSSE page, the official club page of the chapter, was taken down on Friday. And all of the admins of that page, all of their Facebook accounts were also, they actually told, it looked like they were purged. They said that it was an irreversible decision. You couldn't actually contact anyone about it. There was no notice of why this had happened. We had no warning, you know, nothing from Facebook. Just when you went to sign into the account or your account, a message came up that said it had been permanently disabled. We immediately launched well, you asked how we came to know about this. I mean, the members of our party immediately realized that this had happened. We're very active on social media. The club at University of Michigan has been around since I think 2007, very active on the campus. We put one of our last posts was talking about the revelations of Trump's coup on January 6th. So we noticed immediately that we'd been taken down. We launched a campaign through the WSWS, through our other social media accounts, demanding that our pages be restored, which was beginning to gain steam. This wasn't the first time that we've had to campaign for our accounts to be restored. Certainly not the first time we're campaigning against censorship. And then on Monday, the accounts were restored with, again, no explanation as to why they had been disabled, no communication from Facebook, just everything had reappeared. So that's sort of just the background in terms of the censorship. On Friday, the day that we were, that our accounts were taken down, there was actually a pretty widespread purge of left pages that extended well beyond Michigan. I mean, you know, throughout the US and even in the UK, a different party, the Socialist Workers Party in the UK, had entire branches of their party who lost their accounts as well, most of which have been restored. So that's sort of just the gist of what happened.
So kind of just to follow up on that, you mentioned this earlier, I kind of want to loop that in. You know, this has been part of like a kind of a longer trajectory. I think as early as like 2017, I've someone who's, you know, follow a lot of like, you know, WSWS stuff. There's kind of Google algorithms were depressing, people's ability to kind of access, y'all stuff. Something that was markedly different with this one that particularly alarmed me is just going after, kind of these specific local chapters. Something near and dear to my heart is somebody who's like, I'm very emphasized like local Kalamazoo or Michigan stuff on this program. I was gonna say, like, did that seem like kind of a marked escalation? And also, if you could just briefly maybe talk about kind of how this ties into what we've been seeing over the last couple of years. The tech giants didn't just start targeting leftist pages overnight. I think that's
No, of course not. I mean, I think that I'll say a few things. Certainly, it's a marked escalation of the censorship. There's no doubt, and I think that you really can't understand that outside of the current political situation. I mean, if you kind of stop and consider, we're living through a historical turning point in the kind of breakdown of American democracy, but I really think world history. With the onset of the pandemic, just the horrific response of the ruling class to the pandemic. Just weeks ago, an attempted coup at the Capitol. Now the incoming Biden administration, which is calling for unity with those who the very party that enabled Trump and his fascist forces to storm the Capitol. I mean, I don't think that anyone could argue that the political situation in the United States is really reaching a fever pitch. I mean, at heights that maybe have not been seen before since the Civil War. And so I really don't think that you can understand the censorship outside of the real political crisis that's taking place. Having said that, I agree very much. This is not something that just that they just decided to do overnight. The internet poses a real problem for the ruling class because it breaks the stranglehold of information. And I think that they've known for quite a while that how problematic it is for them to really maintain their rule. I mean, for a very long time, the ruling class was able to control the spigots on information. And of course, people found ways around that, but the internet, with the ability for people to connect with one another, to get their news outside of the mainstream bourgeois press, for people to be even doing things like what you're doing now. You decide you wanted to start a podcast and have one. That's a threat. And I think beyond that, the fact that people are able to see each other, talk to each other, see the conditions of workers, maybe within their industry, even internationally. This reality, it really poses a problem to the narrative that the ruling class wishes to impose in order to maintain power. And so, as you said, this has been a concerted effort to try and control social media and to control the flow of information. Maybe a couple points on the history of that. The World Socialist website, we noticed that we had been targeted by the changes in Google's algorithm in 2017. And it was very clear. It's quite well documented on the WSWS. You can go to the WSWS.org and go to the internet censorship category and see, years worth of material from our site. We launched an open letter to Google that was aimed primarily at rallying the working class behind this demand for the freedom of the internet. People have the right to access social media. They have the right to information. And then this has been really escalated over the past few years. I had pulled up actually one interesting This is just to give a sense, and you obviously, we could talk about this, the kind of documenting the whole history and escalation of censorship for quite a long time, but this is just one example of what's taking place behind the scenes. This is from a WSWS article on a NATO conference in 2018, where Facebook's chief security officer, Alex Stamos, speaking before an audience, says, our societies overall are going to have to start to adapt to the idea that not all information is created equal. He warned that millions of people who feel they've been ignored or oppressed are using Facebook to push for radical politics, that these individuals and organizations of domestic influence operators that needed to be stopped. And then just this past year, November, Google CEO was asked if they could name one high-profile entity or person. The question was from a liberal ideology that they've censored. And in response, they acknowledged that they had issues with the World Socialist website, I think openly stating for the first time that they had been censoring our website. So yes, this has a long history. This is not something that they've decided to do overnight, and I think it's very intimately bound up with the immense crisis politically, socially, throughout the United States, which is the center of world capitalism.
Yeah, definitely, you couldn't agree more. And it's especially in like last few years, we've had kind of the genie is out of the bottle. Just quick background about myself and my listeners know this. One of those folks post 2016, kind of really heard the S word for the first time, and I actually owe a lot to IYSSE. They're one of the first groups I found post 2016. I was able to kind of help my baby leftist brain start learning about actual like Marxism and stuff. So I wanted to kind of ask, pivot a little bit. There's been a lot of dialogue about free speech absolutism in some kind of lefty circles. People, the pros and cons of things like banning Donald Trump from Twitter, or what just happened with Parler and such. I was just curious, like, if either I wasn't sure if the Socialist Equality Party had like a line on this, or just you as a particular individual organizer have an opinion you'd like to share. But yeah, there's a lot of discussion about like, if this happens to them, then it will happen to the left. I'd argue it's been happening to the left. But I was kind of curious about like, where do you think this comes at? This sort of intersection of like, fascists having a platform of being online and able to coordinate things like the coup d'etat, and how the relationship between that and our ability to kind of speak out as leftists online.
I think it's a really good question, and I know I've been following those discussions as well. First of all, I'd say I think that there is a very clear distinction between the rights of individuals, organizations to publish, to have Facebook accounts, to tweet, to do things like this, and the President of the United States, with nuclear codes, with control of the armed forces, in the midst of an armed insurrection that he encouraged unfolding, to, when we're talking about the Twitter, I mean, it should be noted that the Twitter ban actually in part came because the Twitter workers were demanding that, they didn't want to have anything to do with this. They felt that that Trump's Twitter account needed to be suspended because of the events that were taking place. I think that there's a very clear distinction. I mean, between the two things. I mean, we certainly don't endorse purging right-wing sites or private accounts, but the shutting down of Trump's access to millions of Twitter followers as he attempts to overthrow the Constitution is not a free speech issue. Trump was still commander-in-chief of the armed forces. I just want to make one other point on this. I mean, because I think it's significant that there were so many figures on the so-called figures on the left, that as this was unfolding, their first reaction to this, I mean, I'll say specifically Bhaskar Sankara, who is the founder and editor of Jacobin magazine. This was, I don't even think the Capitol had been cleared yet. And Sankara's first reaction was to downplay the significance of this event, to say that it's not a coup, and all those that are calling it a coup are alarmists. And then his first real political statement on it was to come to the defense of Trump's Twitter. And I think that the real, our perspective, what we've outlined on the site, is really there's political motivations behind their kind of obsession over this question, and it's really to downplay the significance, to downplay the seriousness of the events, and I think that's really at the heart of it. Because if you really take the what happened at the Capitol seriously, and if you really took the time to understand it, to dig in, I mean, you can't do that without understanding the complicity that these fascists had within the state itself. And I think when you start pulling on that thread, the entire system really, that those that are at fault, are also the Democratic Party. I mean, not to say that they organized the coup, but the role that they've played in enabling Trump, you can't really understand the situation without getting into that. And then now, what are they doing? You had the President of the United States stoke an attempted insurrection, and the Democrats they're calling for unity. Biden saying that they have to have unity between these two parties. And that really cuts across the line of these organizations that call themselves left, that are really just, in the end, subservient to the Democratic Party.
Oh, no, oh, excuse me. Very true. Coffee went down the wrong pipe. All right. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. That leads into, I've got kind of two broader organizing questions. So I've been asking a lot of people who are kind of, left of center, left of progressive, the Marxist folks about here's our situation now. We have this kind of centrist neoliberal in the White House. How does that change kind of like our resistance to capitalism? And I'm sure y'all have been having a lot of discussions about this over on the East Side. I guess I'll frame it more locally. What are some of y'all's priorities as a local chapter of the IYSSE to pivot now that we are under a different old white capitalist dude?
Well, I think that it would be a real mistake to think that because Trump's out of the White House, because the fascists that stormed the Capitol didn't succeed. And I just want to make the point that I don't think they were very far off from succeeding. I mean, they went in with zip ties. I mean, all of the evidence that's coming out now paints an incredibly stark picture of just how close they came to maybe taking hostages, and then who knows what. But the broader point, I think it would be a real mistake to think that the danger has passed. What is the significance of the fact that the Democratic Party is seeking unity with the very forces that enabled Trump throughout his 4 years? The very forces that some of whom were participated in showing these people around the Capitol that these political figures are still being held up as good standing citizens of the political establishment. I mean, I just want to warn and guard against this idea that, okay, well, now we've got Biden. I wouldn't characterize him as a centrist or even neoliberal. I don't know how beneficial that is. He's pursuing incredibly dangerous policies. I think in particular his policy on the pandemic, and I'll relate this back to your question about organizing locally, University of Michigan. But Biden's made it very clear that in his first 100 days, he wants to reopen the schools. This is coming as the pandemic is raging out of control. Hospitals are closing down because they're financially in ruin. 21 hospitals in 2020 shut down in the middle of a pandemic. Talk about the irrationality of the system. You've got 3,000 people dying every day. The death toll is about to hit 500,000. I mean, under these conditions, his priority is get the schools open so that workers can get back to work, so that the economy doesn't suffer, because everything that's been done since the pandemic hit has been to not to save for the health and well-being of workers, but for the health and well-being of the stock market, for the corporations. And what is he doing now? Now he's saying the schools are going to open. There's going to be no shutdown. He basically campaigned on that issue. He's diverting in no fundamental way from the Trump administration in terms of his response to the pandemic. And I think that this is important, because you can't have a policy of social murder, which is what it is, and also have democratic rights. Those things they're not compatible. And we've been saying this for months. And what have we seen? We've seen an escalation of censorship, right? I mean, you can't understand these things as separate phenomena. They're intimately connected. And I think that, in terms of just local organizing, I mean, we certainly do local organizing, but it's with an international perspective. And the University of Michigan, IYSSE, in fact, which is, I think, maybe partly why they were targeted, it played a very important role in the U of M graduate student instructor strike this fall. The students at U of M and to a certain degree, actually, the workers at U of M went on strike, and they were saying it's dangerous policy to be open. And the university responded with just a brutal attack. I mean, they were threatening the students. The AFT basically, I'm sorry, not the AFT. It was I can't remember the union that they're associated with, but they completely isolated them. They had even other locals that were on the chapter, and they just isolated the strike and then shut it down. And then what happened? Like days later, there were outbreaks at the University of Michigan, and they were forced to close down this, not just University of Michigan campus, but all the surrounding campuses. And I mean, so that was the type of work we were doing. We were fighting to expand the strike, to shut down the schools, for full income for workers that have to stay home with their families. And I think on top of that, not just work, a club that's on campus, but orientation is to the working class. And the members of the IYSSE in Michigan, with the members of the Socialist Equality Party in Michigan, have a strong presence among auto workers in the area. And I think it's significant to note that the walkouts that occurred in March in Michigan were a large part of what shut down the auto industry to begin with. I mean, if they could have, they had every intention of keeping it open as essential workers, essential production. And I think that going forward, that we'll continue to do this type of work. I mean, we're campaigning to have the schools closed to save lives until the pandemic is under control. And I think more broadly, we're campaigning everywhere to build a movement, a socialist movement, an international socialist movement that's oriented to the working class, that is in direct opposition to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And that's the work that we've been carrying out, and that we intend to carry out as we go forward.
All right. Well, I think all basically I've just got my closing, like, how do people get involved question. My co-host Lawrence joined us a few minutes ago. I wanted to make sure. Lawrence, did you have anything you wanted to ask? Sorry, I muted you. Like, there's a bunch of crumpling sound.
I was driving. I was trying to mute myself because I'm still driving right now. But I've been here for most of the conversation, for like, at least half of it, about half. So yeah. Um, I actually don't. I can't. There was a part that was interesting to me. We were talking about censorship, and y'all was talking about Donald Trump. That I thought was interesting. I didn't catch all of that part. I came in right at that part. And I don't want y'all to rehash it because I've already talked about it. So I mean, like, so I kind of missed that. Like, was the synopsis of it basically saying there's a difference between censorship of those that challenge power and censorship of like censorship of him of Trump being of Trump when he was in power or just or like now because him being banned, I would argue if we're going to have the term of service when it comes to these platforms that I think that we can all agree should be the internet should be looked at as a public utility, and we're in I think we can all agree to that. But I think we could also all agree that if we're going to go by the terms and service of these platforms, uh 45 should have been banned along. Well, should have been he should have been gone a long time ago. Like if he was any other regular person, he would have been got clapped. If you know, doing the inciting the hateful rhetoric, inciting violence, retweeting neo Nazis, like like I don't know how you can justify that.
Yeah.
Even a person like myself who is a free speech absolutist, like I mean Andy, me and you talk about all the time. I like battle rap. Battle rap is the personification of free speech absolutism in its fullest context. But like slander, defamation, libel, inciting violence, when you do those things, you're no longer you're under our First Amendment law. Well, this is the government cracking down on free speech. You would be held accountable. Even if you're as powerful as the president, you should still be held accountable. I think we could all agree to that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a larger discussion in there about kind of the temerity a lot of these big tech platforms, and they always seem bold enough to go by their own terms of service until such a point as you know, the financial viability of backing an outright fascist. Is like, I don't know if there's like a gauge or something somewhere, but
The gauge is when you start hurting billionaires because as you saw,
yeah.
Discord clapped what was it, Wall Street bets when you start
But we'll
hurting hedge
be
funds.
talking about that later on the show. Uh, All right. Well, I want to be respectful to your time, Genevieve. I know you got to hit the road in just a sec. But just want to close by asking, so if people want to learn more about IYSSE, whether they're in Ann Arbor or, you know, the broader Michigan area, how would they find that out, and how would they get involved?
Well, the IYSSE University of Michigan Facebook page is back up. You can, if you're in the immediate area, you can go to it, contact us there. I would encourage everyone, though, to follow the World Socialist website, wsws.org. To look for the IYSSE in particular, you can go to wsws.org/IYSSE. But I really would encourage everyone to read the WSWS Daily to support us. You can't. It's a perspective you can't find anywhere else, and to get involved. You know, the situation is incredibly serious. There's not time to lose. It's not time to be sitting on the sidelines.
I do have one quick question. I know that University of Michigan had a strike about the school reopening. What
Mhm.
happened after that? Because I know, because like I didn't hear much about what happened after the strike. I knew there was a strike. I think they reopened or something crazy along, like they opened at like half capacity or something.
Well, the strike, yeah, we have actually a really important article on the WSWS called "The Lessons of the University of Michigan Strike," which is a recounting of the events. But the strike was shut down. The university administration, which is deeply tied to the Democratic, I mean, it is the Democratic Party, and people, we have also a piece on the site about the Board of Regents, which is quite damning. But they filed for an injunction so that they could take legal action against the students. And then the GEO, the parent or union of GEO, which was the graduate student union that was leading the strike, isolated the strike. They sent in their operatives to shut it down, which they did. And then, I think it was days later, outbreaks started taking place on the campus. Pretty soon they were seeing, very large number of cases. And then the state itself, the state of Michigan itself, cases skyrocketed. And I think it was maybe Governor Gretchen Whitmer that issued um, the stay-at-home orders that also closed the schools. So they were forced to close. Um,
Can the
but
students, sorry,
no, go ahead.
can this, okay, the students are striking, if I remember correctly, because of them not getting paid hazard pay and things of that nature, but also the school reopening, knowing that this virus can spread. What
Right.
they were fighting to not happen ended up happening. Can the
Yes.
students sue? Because the students be like, look, we told you this happened. Look, it happened. Y'all put our lives in danger. Can the students fight back and sue?
I'm not sure about. I'm not familiar with kind of possibilities in a legal sense. But in terms of can the students fight back, I'd say absolutely. They did. They showed that they could, and they got widespread support. I mean, there were workers, construction workers, auto workers. We published statements from local auto workers speaking in support of the students. The dining workers supported the students. I mean, they had widespread support. I think that the real fundamental question is not really, the legal challenge, but really turning to the working class, building a movement, not being waging your struggle within the framework of this union that strangled them. That's not on the same side of the barricade as they are. In terms of the fight, you have to know if you're going to wage a battle, you have to know who are your allies and who are your enemies. And in this case, and in every case, the Democratic Party is on the other side. The union is completely beholden to the Democratic Party. The university administration is beholden to the Democratic Party. We have to fight to build an independent movement. And that's what the IYSSEs are fighting to do. The SCP is fighting to do. And the World Socialist website is an indispensable tool in that fight. And anyway, I'll have to sign off now, but it was really nice talking to both of you. Thank you for the questions.
All right, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the show. Solidarity to y'all, and again, that's Socialist Equality Party, IYSSE. I believe there might be a chapter here at Western.
Yes, there is. Actually, it was just reestablished.
Oh, fantastic.
Hey.
All right,
Okay.
thank you guys.
Oh yeah, have a fantastic evening.
You too.
That revolution solution.